Hello, this is Solomon Castillo from James Madison High School here with 20 Minutes with a Pro. Today we're interviewing a former senior probation officer, Manuel Vallejo. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Been looking forward to it.
Of course. And also, tell us a little bit about yourself, any hobbies, pets, or stuff you like to do, stuff like that.
Well, definitely have some hobbies. I'm into, I like to play golf. And so I like to be out there on the links, as they say, play a little bit of golf, getting some fresh air. I've been playing for some time. Got into it when I was a young age, played in high school. I also love music. I really love music, listening to music, making sure maybe a little too much where I like to have everything in the right order, have the right amplifiers for the right speakers, and really get detailed, when it comes to my music. And I want to hear everything, all the little nuances within the music that you can't hear from like a compressed file, like on, like a phone file or whatever. But also play music. I'm a musician. I've been playing drums for about 20 years. Started playing drums when I was about 16 years old, and now I'm 36, and so I've been playing. Don't play as much as I used to play, but I still get behind the drums once in a while just to kind of keep the chops up and everything. But I really love, just kind of being behind there. That was a huge outlet for me when I was younger, to just kind of sit behind a drum set, put some earphones on, listen to music, and just kind of start playing along with the music. And so love music, and like I said, love to play golf and be out there with my son as well. We like to do that.
Nice. What type of music do you listen to?
Really, man, honestly, anything that sounds good. And
Nice.
it's very subjective, right? Obviously, when you say that, but really anything that sounds good, man. Like, if it has a good beat, if it has a nice chorus to it, people say the hook, the hook is good. Then that's what I listen to. I guess if I had to kind of pinpoint maybe a style, then I think kind of like a jazz, hip hop fusion, like a lo-fi hip hop sound, real like easy, mellow, but has some really nice beats to it. More of kind of hip hop. I love jazz. Played saxophone as well when I was younger. Grew up on it. My dad loved jazz, and so we would listen to it all the time in the car, on road trips and stuff. But kind of that music, that jazz hip hop fusion style. I like to listen to some old school jazz, as well. And then really some modern stuff. I grew up in the late 80s and 90s, and so kind of that era of music as well. I do like hip hop, and so some of the early stuff. Fortunately, I don't know. Honestly speaking, I can't really get into a lot of the newer stuff when it comes to it. It just doesn't click with me. But I think it's just a time when you're born, you kind of get you get enamored in that era, and so. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm into. What I'm listening to right now is a little bit of that jazz hip hop fusion style.
Yeah, same. I can't really get into some of the new stuff, but some of it can be really good, but some of it is it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah,
but,
there's a band called Snarky Puppy. Snarky
Puppy.
Yeah, they're a phenomenal group. It's just music, like I said, but it's about 15 different musicians, and they play all types of stuff, and they just kind of just get down and start having these jam sessions and everything like that. And some of the music they produce is just incredible. So if you're looking for something new to listen to, check out Snarky Puppy.
Snarky Puppy. Never heard of them. I'll definitely have to check them out.
Definitely. Sounds good, man.
All right. But anyway, so can you explain to us exactly what you do for your job for a probation officer?
Sure. So as a senior juvenile probation officer, we really work in what we call like the social services, right? When we look at like law enforcement and we look at public safety, probation falls under kind of the rehabilitative services. And so what I did was I case managed. So I had a caseload of juveniles that were on probation. And so my job was to kind of provide them services to where we could try to rehabilitate a juvenile coming out of it. So kind of the process, and I'll try to be as concise and short as possible, but we would get a case. Someone picks up a charge, the case comes into us as a probation department. We look over the case, depending on whether it was like a citation, like a really low charge. Let's say you were caught, you took a pack of chips and some soda from the gas station. Well, it's under $50, so chances are you're probably not going to go to jail, right? And so, we would take that charge, we would look over it. We would bring the family in to interview them, to kind of get a sense of the juvenile themselves, a little background history, what type of family life did they have, if there's any services that are being offered, are they in counseling already, or are they going to school, right? Is there any other behavioral issues that maybe we don't know about that are going to come up in the interview, right? And so a lot of these questions are asked during that interview with the family to determine whether or not further services are needed for that particular juvenile. On more, what would we call severe cases? Let's say it's like an assault, a burglary, right? Those are felonies. Those are higher misdemeanor felony type charges. A lot of times those would go straight to the district attorney's office. They would review it, and then we would still call the family in to kind of get their side of what happened, still get that family history, because we're going to have to take that case to court. And so that juvenile is going to have to actually go to court for that charge. And so my job was to gather all that information, type out, like what I would always call like a really extensive family history. And then we would take that case to court with that juvenile to court, and we would have to stand before the judge and let the court process kind of play out. A couple things can happen. When a case goes to court, they could either, depending on the charge, obviously, the judge can decide, obviously once the defense attorney and the district attorney kind of do their thing, and we finally get before the judge, if there's some sort of plea agreement based off of what they've kind of already worked out, then they could avoid maybe going to jail, and they would be placed on this term of probation. And so if they're put on a term of probation, then I would be, depending on the charge and where they're going to go, because remember, we have a lot of different units for a lot of specialized types of crime. And so if it was a substance abuse, if there was a drug charge, and let's say this juvenile had a lot of extensive history with using drugs, then we would probably send them to a substance abuse unit where they would be drug tested a lot more often than normal. Does that make sense? And same thing, if it was a certain charge, let's say like a sex offense, maybe it was a sex offense, a sex charge, then they would actually be placed in a unit that deals specifically with juveniles who have committed sex offenses. And so depending on the charge, that's kind of where their case would go. If they're in a gang, if they're gang affiliated, we would document all that, and they would probably go to a higher level gang unit where they would be supervised a lot more intensely than they would like on a normal term of probation. So there's a lot of factors that go into where this juvenile is placed once they've gone through the court process. And so for me, I've worked with as a regular field probation officer, just everyday type cases. I've also worked with those that have been placed in facilities. And so those that have been placed in pretty much, let's say, been sent for rehabilitation in a facility away from home. And then I've also worked with the sex offenders. So those that have been charged with sex crimes, I've worked with them. And so once I have the case and now they're on my caseload, basically there's a term of probation saying, hey, for the next 3 years, you're gonna have to do all of these things ordered by the court. And you're gonna have to follow all of these. And if you violate any of them by not following them, then your case is going to be referred back to the court, and you're going to have to answer for why you're not able to follow your your conditions of probation. And so at that point, then that could be a longer term of probation. That could be jail time, in some cases. And so it really depends. And so what I would do is I would monitor the juveniles on probation. I would make them aware of what they need to get done. I would keep track of if they're getting it done. I would drug test, right? I would make sure they're staying clean. I would make sure they're going to school by doing school visits unannounced. I'd go by the house in the evenings to make sure if there was a curfew for them, I do curfew checks to make sure that they were at home when they needed to be at home, and ultimately just really following the terms of their probation conditions. And so, every day is different, because obviously when you have a caseload of 30 individuals, depending on the situation, it's just, and that's what I really liked about it was how different in every day could be. Does that
Yeah.
Shoot me some follow-ups if you want some more explanation.
Well, about how you said there was kind of rules that they had to follow. Has there ever been a time one of those rules was broken or not followed correctly or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. There's plenty of times where juveniles don't follow their term of probation. And so if, depending on the charge, right, originally, if it was like a misdemeanor, then obviously we would try to give them opportunity to try to correct the behavior, because ultimately we want to see them succeed, right? It's not saying, hey, we want to lock you up and throw away the key type of thing. It's really, we're trying to rehabilitate to try to get them back on track.
Are you the first in your family to kind of go down this path in a career?
Yes, for this specific, kind of going down the law, public safety, correction, security type fields, yes, most of my family went into education, and but I've always enjoyed the court systems and the court process. I've never really looked at like being law enforcement, but I've loved the aspect of working in the criminal justice system. So this was a good opportunity for that.
All right. What made you realize that this was the type of work you wanted to do, and when did you realize that?
I think later in my my teens, I started working at an aftercare facility, basically like summer camp almost for juveniles, and they get out of school. I'd help them with their homework, and you kind of learn and you kind of get to know some of the students. You kind of hear some of their stories, and a lot of them were, they were in trouble, and so you'd be able to kind of talk to them and try to give them some advice and try to stay on track. And so I was doing that even before I got into the line of work, and I've always really enjoyed just being able to kind of pour in and try to help young people try to stay on the right track. And so when I went to college, I was trying to figure out what could I do, and so I was going to go into teaching. And my guidance counselor, she said, well, juvenile probation, also fits with like a criminal justice degree. I was thinking about doing that, a criminology degree. And so I was like, man, I've never thought about probation. And so I looked into it a little bit more, and I started to read about what they did, what they do in the community, and how they try to help the families and the juveniles. And so I really thought it was interesting. And so I kind of pursued it from that point on. So I've always loved working with that population, that kind of that teenage at-risk population. And so I just felt it was a good track to take through college.
Okay. And what are like maybe one or two things that you really enjoyed about being a probation officer?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing obviously is working with the youth, the juveniles. I've always enjoyed, like I said, working with that population. One of the things that people probably don't recognize is that most juveniles actually stay out of trouble after they've been on some sort of supervision, right? Probation term. So seeing kind of those success stories, if you would, Yeah. I've had a lot of cases where I had a couple cases where, the juvenile came in at 13 years old, and I didn't see them. They didn't leave until 17, or they aged out at 18. So I had them for like almost 4 to 5 years. Like imagine having somebody, and working with them for 4 to 5 years. That's a long time, especially only 13 and so, seeing kind of the progression. And there's some slip ups, there's some up and downs. Obviously, if they're on a term for that long, they've made some mistakes, but kind of getting to the end of the term, and then once they're off probation, their term ends, and then you get like a letter in the mail just thanking you for being there for them and to helping them kind of through it. I mean, I have about 5 or 6 of those letters, in my desk now that I kind of go back and I look at, just because, it doesn't sound like a whole lot, but just to know that you made a difference in someone's life is a big thing. And that's really why you do it. You do it because you don't want to lock people up, but you want to see them get out and to succeed down the road. And so I really love that aspect of it, to kind of see the success stories at the end, and also the people. I think, it's a very big family dynamic when it comes to working in these types of fields. People have your back, people are there for you, to support you, to help you. And so, working where I worked with juvenile probation, I mean, I loved everybody that I worked with. It was a great team oriented type, and so, I really enjoyed working with the people, and you get to know a lot of people. You get to kind of learn a lot about the court process, right? You're in court all the time. You talk to defense attorneys, you talk to district attorneys, you talk to judges. You travel. I love to travel around Texas, visiting students that are or youth that are in in facilities around Texas. So, yeah, those are a couple things that I really like about the job.
All right. What qualities do you think make a really good probation officer?
Well, I mean, you have to be able to listen, and you have to be able to know when to not talk and just to listen. You have to be very empathetic, right? A lot of times what we see from juveniles coming into the system is, right, we can always say, you can't choose who you're born to, right? You're just born into this world. And sometimes you can't determine who your family is, what they've gone through, kind of where they're at socioeconomically speaking, if there's been any criminal history within the family there. So a lot of times you get these juveniles that come into the system, and it doesn't excuse the behavior, but you can understand why they're having trouble. And so I think being very empathetic to a person and understanding where they come from, their history, their family history, you get to start to look at and say, okay, you know what? I can understand why you're doing some of these things. And so I think that's a huge component of that you should have, is being empathetic and have compassion, and then be able to listen very well and know when to not talk,
Yeah. So, in your opinion, what do you think is the most surprising thing about being a probation officer? Something that most people don't realize, that's what a probation officer does.
Well, one of the surprising things that I think that, when it comes to probation that people don't know is, we travel all over the United States. We have students all over the United States in different facilities. A lot of these facilities are there to try to rehabilitate them. Like I said, they provide college courses. They provide just like going to school somewhere, out of state. And some of these facilities are really impressive. They look like college campuses almost, and so we're all over the place, traveling, trying to put students in the best possible position to succeed. Another thing, that maybe they don't know that we do is, we try to obviously stay safe, and that's number one, is to be safe. But we execute warrants just like other agencies do. If a juvenile has a warrant, we'll have to go out there and knock on their door and try to see if they're there, and then take them into custody. And as well, I will say this, and you can use any of this that you want, is I think a lot of people don't know how many hats probation officers have to wear. Sometimes we're teachers, right? Sometimes we're counselors. Sometimes we're parents to some of these young people because they don't have that at home. Sometimes we're a friend, and I say that loosely, but yeah, sometimes, you have to just be able to be there and to understand, where they're coming from, and to not, even though they made a mistake, there's been times where, I didn't do anything that day just because I knew they were going through something. And so all I wanted to do was, hey, you know what? Let's talk it out. I'll listen to you. Let's figure out the best thing to do for you next. And yes, I'm going to have to take some action on this, but I'll do it tomorrow, just so that we can, so I can give them their moment to be able to express what they need to and get it all out. And so I think, a lot of times with probation, people think all you do is, you're just there to lock me up. Not at all. That's the last thing we want to do. It is. And I don't lock anybody up. You lock yourself up by not following your conditions, by not doing what you need to be doing. But for the vast majority of cases, we're really trying to help them get on track and to be successful down the road.